Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 11, Participatory Method. And our topic is Delineation of Key Features. In sharp contrast to the idea of detachment and value neutrality propagated by the early comparative approach, the participatory approach is open and empathetic about attachment and partisanship with the marginal groups, whose perceptions they argue have been marginalized in social science knowledge. According to Parthanath Mukherjee, participatory research methodology is based on three important conditions, which are: there is a target community or group which is in felt need of changing its underdog, oppressed, marginalized, exploited situation to a more favorable one. This target group, in cooperation and conjunction with an acceptable external interventionist-oriented researchers, formulates research goals, participates in data collection, and, as far as possible, also in analysis and drawing of conclusions, which directly fed into decision making relating to community action for change or development. The ultimate aim of the external researcher is to attempt to ensure complete ownership of knowledge, for example, of health system technology management techniques, by the target community. Participatory research is thus a process specifically directed towards the ameliorative or transformative change or development to the conditions of life and living of the group and population who themselves are participants in the research process. Before we go into the comparison of the participatory research methodology with the so-called traditional or conventional research methodology, let us also gain an idea of what the concept of participation entails. The term has, of course, received different interpretations and meanings in different contexts. Let us confine ourselves to the context of social research, and in this context, you can say that the participation has at least three dimensions. Participation entails the involvement of all those concerned with decision making about what and how something has to be done. Participation involves mass contribution to the efforts for development. This implies the involvement of all those affected in the implementation of the decisions, and all those involved in share in the output of the efforts planned and implemented for development. These ideas about participation refer to the entire socio-economic processes of a society and therefore concern the researchers of social processes of change and development. There is no doubt that there exists a wide gap between the macro level goals of a society and what generally happens in the name of participation. Often the participation of the people in the actual work implementing a plan or program is projected as community participation. In our opinion, unless the community shares in decision making about planning and implementation of the plan or program, We cannot name it as participation. Mere acceptance or occurrence of unpaid labor in the name of participation is the worst form of actual exploitation of labor. In this sense, you may argue for making a distinction between the participation of just a few local individuals and the organized involvement of the community as such. We need to also be cautious about going overboard and expecting the full autonomy of the community in controlling all activities of a plan. In real life situations, such a notion of participation may not be feasible from any angle. Or all the same, the idea of participation or of community participation as we have developed in this paragraph is only a logical progression of the ideas put forward by the educators of adult learners. In this sense, participation has an intrinsic value for participants, and the researchers is also one among the participants. Most importantly, community participation ensures incorporation of indigenous knowledge and expertise into implementation of development plans. This leads to freedom from dependence on so-called professionals. Participatory research is a process aiming to bring about improvement in the conditions of living of the people who themselves participate in the research. Its byproduct is the ownership of knowledge in the hands of the people, making for sustainability of improved conditions of living. Mukherjee has presented some of the basic tenets of so-called academic or traditional or conventional research methodology as perceived by action researchers or social activists who advance the argument for participatory research (PR) methodology. This is because the latter is generally counterposed against the former. The interventionist role of the subject is a prime condition of PR. The scholar is committed to bring about social change. The ideal position that an external object distance should be maintained so that the situation being studied can remain unaffected by the subject is considered untenable. It follows that in PR there is no scope for value neutrality. It is applied towards desirable directed change and development. The top-down approach of CR, in which the researcher and his or her institution decides upon the focus, methodology, and outcome of the study, and regards the people who are studied as objects who are there for the convenience of the researchers, has to give way to research which is viewed as a process which the people go through as a step in awareness building about the situation of the oppressed. Most CR methodologies, it is argued, originated in the West with an explicit objective to control its subject people. In contrast, the empowerment of the marginalized through the research process is the avowed goal of PR. CR focuses on scientific rigor in the explanation and understanding of phenomena, which is then disseminated to the scientific community through accredited journals. It is assumed that and expected that the knowledge so generated sooner or later will contribute directly or indirectly to practical application through social policy, social work, and action research. PR, on the other hand, is viewed no more as a study of the people but a process which the people go through and as a step in awareness building about the situation of the oppressed, in which ideally research is with and for the people and not on them. This shows that participatory research criticizes conventional research for its apparent insensitivity to the problems at the grassroots. Conventional research, on the other hand, criticizes participatory research for its lack of scientific rigor. But you would note that the participatory research does not view itself as the sole alternative to conventional research. Fernandez recognizes the value of so-called conventional research, both in mobilization of people and in projecting macro-reality essential for policy argument. According to Mukherjee, participatory research, as discussed above by the Fernandez and the Veggies, is a kind of tool-oriented method. We are here discussing methods or techniques of research. You may say that advocating an integration of the elements of both is an example of mixing methods that are suitable for inquiring into the practical objectives of a participatory plan. Mukherjee is also raising an interesting point about such macro theories as hermeneutics, post-structuralism, critical realism, which do not subscribe to positivism, but they are equally a part of the conventional research, in the sense that they have little use of mobilizing participatory or action research. Rather, Mukherjee says the sweep and strength of the currents that such macro theories generate in society often create very conditions for grassroots actions to become significant and necessary. The question comes up how to design one's research to make it promote those social values which are implied in the search for increased participation. As a matter of fact, established research institutions fit into the prevailing class relations that ensure benefits to the upper and middle strata researchers only. Participatory research, on the other hand, assumes that through its method, research can itself turn into a tool for participatory development. Both the national and local power structures are by and large not conducive to accept the force of conscientization once it comes into existence due to participatory research methods. Practitioners of participatory movements would certainly welcome research if it would help them to understand their own social identity, to become cognizant of their relationship to their social relationships affecting them and the greater potential of shared resources at the larger than one's family level. The inclusion of questions on participation into one's research requires selecting key issues for inquiry. The criteria for selecting the issues need, in turn, be participatory. Here, the most important point is to beware of the rhetoric of participation, which is almost universal in all spheres of current discourse. In advocating participatory research in the social sciences, we need to accept the fact that the building participatory practices and institutions is a dynamic and gradually evolving process in response to social needs and values and available skills and resources. Participatory approaches cannot be either legislated or adopted in a matter of days. They generally grow over time with experience, practice, and analysis of what works and what does not. To return to the beginning, one has stressed throughout the unit the importance of linkages between the overall theoretical assumptions, the approaches, and finally the appropriate field techniques that follow. It is but natural that the concern with development, with wanting to represent and incorporate the views of different sections of society, would lead to a shift in the actual mode of doing fieldwork. Thus, a participatory approach has been spelled out to imply a participatory field appraisal. I very briefly touch upon the more widely used forms of the rapid rural appraisal RRA and the participatory rural appraiser PRA. Rapid rural appraisal or RRA is a way of organizing people for collecting and analyzing information within a short time span. It can be defined as any systematic process of investigation to acquire new information in order to draw and validate inferences, hypotheses, observations, and conclusions in a limited period of time. It has flexibility to adjust to situations because it does not imply or recommend a standard set of methods to be applied in each case. The methods vary from situation to situation and are determined by local conditions, local problems, and objectives at hand. As a methodology for agricultural development, RRA was developed for quick field-oriented results with objectives as appraising agricultural and other needs of the rural community, prioritizing areas of research tailored to such needs, assessing feasibility of developmental needs and action plans, implementing action plans and monitoring and evaluating them. Participatory rural appraisal (PRA) is a methodology for interacting with the villagers, understanding them and learning from them. It involves a set of principles, a process of communication, and a menu of methods for seeking villagers' participation in putting forward their point of view to make use of such learning. It initiates a participatory process and seeks to sustain it. PRA is sometimes known as participatory rapid appraisal, where the emphasis is on both participatory and rapid. The emphasis on rapid is more in terms of data collection, which is compared to the conventional survey method. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self-Learning podcast.